Last Saturday night, my wife Emily decided to throw me a surprise birthday party. She was never one to pull off surprises. She usually sucked at keeping secrets, but this time, she nailed it. I had absolutely no idea it was coming. The house was packed with friends, co-workers, neighbors, people I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't some casual get-together either. It was one of those over-the-top events with expensive catering, a hired bartender, custom decorations, the whole 9 yards. She even had a damn cake shaped like a golf club because she knew I'd recently taken up golfing again. Everyone was there, and the night seemed perfect. But looking back, that should have been my first red flag. Emily doesn't do perfect. She's messy, a little chaotic, always late to everything. This version of her? This wasn't the woman I'd been living with for 7 years. But at the time, I brushed it off, figuring maybe she'd just gone all out for my big day. After all, 35's not exactly a small number, right? It's funny. Throughout the night, people kept pulling me aside and giving me these weird compliments, like, "Man, you're so lucky to have Emily." Or, "She really loves you, dude. You can tell." It started to get a little awkward, but I figured maybe I was just overthinking it because, yeah, she did go all out. Still, I noticed how she kept disappearing during the party. Every time I looked for her, she was off in a corner, whispering with someone. She'd flash me this big smile when she caught my eye, like everything was fine, but something wasn't sitting right with me. Around 11 p.m., Emily made this big toast. Everyone gathered around. She raised her glass, and the room got quiet. She said some nice things about me, about us, about how we've been through so much together. But then her tone shifted. "And there's one more thing I wanted to do tonight," she said, glancing around the room with a mischievous smile. "Something really special, something I've been waiting for." The crowd leaned in, a mix of curiosity and anticipation. I felt a little nervous, like maybe she'd planned some elaborate birthday prank, or worse, that she was going to embarrass me with some sappy speech. But what she did next, nothing could have prepared me for that. She walked over to the front door, and for a second, I thought she was just going to grab a gift or something. Instead, she opened it, and in walked a guy I didn't recognize. He was tall, built, and carried himself with this cocky smirk that instantly put me on edge. Emily looked at him, then back at me and said, "I think it's time we all met the other man in my life." The whole room froze. People started exchanging awkward glances, some of them whispering to each other. I just stood there, completely dumbfounded, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I didn't know what to say or do. My first instinct was that this had to be some kind of twisted joke, but Emily's face told me otherwise. "Mark," she said, motioning to the guy, "has been a big part of my life lately, and I thought, what better way to celebrate your birthday than for all of us to finally be honest?" At that moment, I felt my stomach drop, like I'd been hit by a truck but couldn't feel the pain yet. The entire room was staring at me, waiting for my reaction. I locked eyes with Emily, searching for some kind of explanation, some sign that this wasn't real. But she just stood there, calm as ever, like she'd been planning this for months. The room was dead silent. I stood there, trying to process what had just happened, trying to make sense of it all. My own wife had just introduced me to some random guy, in front of everyone, with a casual smile on her face like this was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't know if I wanted to scream, laugh, or throw up. My hands clenched around the glass I was holding, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I hadn't said a word yet, because honestly, I didn't know what to say. Mark, the guy, had this F******ng grin on his face, like he was enjoying this. He stepped forward, reached out his hand and said, "Nice to finally meet you, man." I didn't take his hand. Couldn't. My body felt like it had turned to stone, frozen in disbelief. "Emily?" I finally managed to croak out, my voice shaky, barely keeping it together. "What the hell is going on?" Emily raised an eyebrow, like I was the one acting crazy. "I told you," she said with this nonchalant shrug. "I think it's time for some honesty. No more lies, no more secrets. Mark and I have been seeing each other for a while, and it felt right to finally bring him into the picture. I wanted you to meet him, and well, here we are." She laughed lightly, like this was all just some quirky, harmless revelation. My brain was scrambling, trying to catch up. Seeing each other for a while? What the hell did that mean? Were they involved? How long had this been going on? Was this her idea of a joke? Or had I completely lost my grip on reality? I glanced around the room, hoping someone, anyone, would step in and stop this. But everyone was just staring, too stunned to move. Some of my friends looked like they were trying to disappear into the walls. My brother, who had flown in from out of state just to celebrate with me, had his mouth hanging open, looking at Emily like she'd grown another head. I turned back to Emily, still in disbelief. "You're seeing him? What are you talking about? You're married to me." She gave me this pitying look, like she was talking to a clueless child. "I know, Brad, and that's not changing. I still love you. This is just something else. Something more. You have to understand, I didn't want to hurt you, but lying wasn't working anymore. So I figured, why not just be honest? We can work through this. It doesn't have to be a big deal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was treating this like she'd forgotten to tell me about a dinner reservation, not that she'd been sneaking around behind my back with this guy. The room felt like it was closing in on me, like the walls were shrinking, and I couldn't breathe. "You didn't want to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. "You thought this was the way to handle it? Throwing some kind of ***** party to parade this guy in front of all our friends and family? That's your idea of honesty?" Emily rolled her eyes, like I was being overdramatic. "You're overreacting, Brad. I didn't parade him around. I'm just being upfront, finally. I'm tired of sneaking around, and I thought you, of all people, would appreciate the truth." My head was spinning, and I could feel my anger rising, threatening to boil over. I turned to Mark, who was still standing there like he was waiting for a ***** medal. "How long?" I asked, my voice like ice. "How long have you two been doing this?" Mark didn't flinch. He had the audacity to look me straight in the eye and say, "About 6 months, give or take." 6 months. I don't remember when I dropped the glass in my hand, but the sound of it shattering on the floor barely registered in my mind. I couldn't see straight. My vision blurred with rage, pain, confusion, and I could feel the weight of every single eye in that room watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. I stepped toward Emily, my voice barely a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the thick tension in the air. "You planned this, didn't you? This whole party? You planned all of this just to, what, humiliate me?" She sighed, rubbing her temple like she was the one having the worst night of her life. "Brad, it's not like that. I wanted this to be a fresh start, for all of us. I thought if we just got everything out in the open, we could move forward, you know? It's not like I don't love you anymore. I just, stop. Just stop." I was done listening to her excuses, done with her casual dismissal of what she had just dropped on me like a bomb. I felt this wave of anger and hurt surge up, stronger than anything I'd ever felt. "You threw a party to turn me into a ***** joke? Is that it? You wanted everyone here to see you make me a fool?" Her eyes flashed with annoyance, like I wasn't getting the point. "I'm not making you a fool, Brad. This is about being honest. I still want us to be together. Mark is just part of the equation now." I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and stormed out of the room, the voices behind me a blur of whispers and gasps. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stand there and listen to another second of her twisted logic. The only thing I knew was that my world had just imploded, and Emily was standing in the wreckage like she didn't have a single regret. I stumbled out the door, barely feeling the crisp night air hit my skin. My mind was racing, spinning out of control as if I'd just been blindsided by a car. I kept replaying Emily's words in my head. Mark is just part of the equation now. That single sentence shattered something inside me in a way I hadn't even thought possible. The woman I'd built a life with, who I'd trusted with everything, had not only cheated on me but had the audacity to celebrate it, to act like it was some bold new chapter in our relationship. I heard the door open behind me, followed by hurried footsteps. For a second, I thought it might be Emily, but no, of course not. She wouldn't be rushing after me. Why would she? No, it was my brother, Kyle. "Brad, wait up," he called out, catching up to me. I could hear the shock in his voice, like he was just as blindsided by all this as I was. He grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. What the ***** just happened in there? What did she mean? She's been seeing this guy. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, trying to find the words, but I couldn't. My throat was tight, and my chest felt like it was being squeezed by a vice. 6 months? I finally managed, my voice hoarse. 6 months, Kyle. She's been with him for 6 months behind my back. And apparently, she thinks it's no big deal. He looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. She's lost her fing mind, he muttered, pacing a few steps in disbelief. What the hell was that stunt inside? Who the F throws a party to announce they're screwing some other guy? In front of everyone? Christ, Brad, this is insane. Insane didn't even begin to cover it. My life had just been flipped upside down in front of all my friends, family, co-workers. Everyone had seen Emily turn me into a public spectacle, and she didn't even blink. There was no remorse, no guilt, just casual indifference, like it was all part of some grand, twisted plan she'd concocted. I clenched my fists, feeling the rage build again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just directed at Emily, it was directed at myself too. How had I not seen this coming? How had I missed the signs? Were there signs? Kyle stood next to me, hands on his hips, shaking his head. You need to do something, man. You can't just let this slide. I turned to him, my voice cracking as I said, I don't even know where to start, Kyle. I don't even know who the hell I'm married to anymore. Before Kyle could say anything, the door to the house opened again. This time it was Emily walking out with that same casual, unaffected expression. She didn't even look upset, just annoyed that I'd left the party. Brad, can we talk? She asked, like we were discussing something trivial, like whether to order takeout or not. Kyle glared at her, stepping in front of me protectively. Talk? You're seriously asking to talk after that stunt? You threw a damn grenade into his life in front of everyone. Emily, you didn't talk inside. You performed. Emily sighed, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear as if this whole thing was some minor inconvenience. I didn't mean for it to turn into this. I thought if we just got everything out in the open, we could handle it like adults. I don't know why everyone's being so dramatic. Dramatic? I snapped, my voice finally finding some strength. You invite some guy you've been screwing for 6 months into our home, introduce him like it's no big deal, and you call me dramatic? Are you out of your mind? Her expression hardened. I didn't invite him to rub it in your face, Brad. I did it because I'm tired of lying. Okay? I didn't want to sneak around anymore. So I thought. I cut her off, my anger boiling over. So you thought what? Throwing a party, parading your affair in front of everyone was the best solution? You thought this would make it easier for me to accept? Easier for you, maybe. But for me, I took a step closer, pointing back toward the house where I could still hear the muffled sounds of the party continuing without us. Do you have any idea how humiliated I feel right now? How disrespected? Emily crossed her arms, her patience clearly running thin. I knew you'd react like this. I tried to make this as painless as possible, but of course you're blowing it all out of proportion. I stared at her, stunned by her arrogance. Painless? She genuinely thought this was some sort of considerate act? That blindsiding me in front of all our friends was her twisted version of being honest? Kyle, who'd been holding his tongue this whole time, finally exploded. Emily, what the hell is wrong with you? You think cheating for 6 months and then springing it on him at his own birthday party is painless? You're delusional. Absolutely ****ing delusional. Emily shot him a cold look. This doesn't concern you, Kyle. Stay out of it. Oh, it concerns me now, he growled. You just blew up my brother's life. You don't get to act like this is no big deal. But Emily didn't even flinch. She just stared at me, like I was the unreasonable one here. Like I was the problem for not accepting her version of reality. And that's when it hit me. The woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't there anymore. This person standing in front of me, making excuses, dismissing my pain, treating me like an obstacle in her little plan. I didn't recognize her. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Why? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Why him? Why now? Why this circus? For the first time, Emily seemed a little uncomfortable. She glanced away for a second before answering. Brad, I just needed something else. Mark gives me things you don't. Excitement, passion. It's not that I don't love you anymore. It's just that things changed. I changed. And I thought, well, maybe we could make it work, all of us. I didn't want to hurt you, but I also didn't want to give up on this new part of my life. I thought maybe you'd understand, eventually. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Understand? You threw a party to celebrate my humiliation. Emily, I don't think I'll ever understand that. We stood there, the three of us, in the cold, harsh reality of what had just happened. And I realized right then that there was no coming back from this. No fixing it. Emily had broken something between us that couldn't be repaired. And for the first time since the night began, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The silence between us hung heavy in the cool night air. For a moment, all I could hear was the distant murmur of the party still going on inside. It was surreal. People were still eating, drinking, laughing like nothing had happened. Like my entire world hadn't just been burned to the ground in front of them. I stood there, staring at Emily, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and I realized the image I had of her. The person I thought I knew was nothing more than a mirage. She wasn't going to apologize. She wasn't going to back down. This was the real Emily, and she had zero remorse for what she'd done. Kyle was still pacing, his anger barely contained. He shot me a look like he was ready to tear into her again, but I shook my head. It wasn't worth it. She wasn't worth it. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything settling in my chest. "I'm done," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a blade. Emily blinked, looking confused for the first time that night. "What do you mean, done?" I locked eyes with her, and for the first time, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The kind of calm that comes when you finally let go of something that's been slowly killing you. "I mean, I'm done with this. Done with you. Done with whatever twisted game you've been playing. You made your choice, Emily, and now I'm making mine." Her expression shifted from confusion to something more calculating. "Brad, you don't have to be so dramatic. We can talk this out. I told you I don't want to end things with you. I just want to add to what we have. Add to what we have." Her words echoed in my head, and I felt another surge of disgust rise in my throat. She was acting like our marriage was some half-finished project, like I was just a piece of her life she could rearrange to fit her new desires. I shook my head. "No, you don't get it. You can't have both. You can't expect me to stand here and accept this arrangement while you sleep with another man. What the hell did you think was going to happen tonight? Did you really believe I'd just smile and go along with it? That I'd be fine sharing my wife with some guy you've been sneaking around with for 6 months? Emily's face hardened again, her defenses going up. "I wasn't sneaking around, Brad. I was figuring things out. And you thought. I cut her off, my voice rising. "You thought you could just rewrite the rules without telling me? Without even having the decency to talk to me first? No, Emily. You don't get to figure things out after you've broken every promise you made to me. You don't get to blindside me at a party you threw under the pretense of celebrating my birthday, only to rub your affair in my face." She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You're being unreasonable. People do this all the time, Brad. You're just too stuck in your old-fashioned ways to see it. Relationships evolve. People evolve." Kyle couldn't take it anymore. "Are you kinda hearing yourself right now? You're not evolving. You're screwing around with another guy and trying to justify it like it's some enlightened choice. You're out of your damn mind, Emily." But she ignored him. Her focus was on me, her tone cold, dismissive. "This doesn't have to be the end, Brad. You're making it a bigger deal than it is. If you'd just be open to something different, we could still have a future together. A better one, even." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless for a moment. She genuinely believed she could manipulate me into accepting this, into embracing it. But the reality was, Emily had destroyed any future we could have had together the moment she decided to bring this guy into our lives without my knowledge, without my consent. There was no fixing this. I took a deep breath, feeling the finality of the situation settle in. "No, Emily," I said slowly, each word measured. "There's no future for us. Not anymore. You made sure of that when you chose to betray me. You planned this entire night to humiliate me, thinking I'd be too weak or too stunned to stand up for myself. Well, here's the truth you seem to be so fond of. I'm done. I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to know you anymore. You've turned this marriage into a joke, and I refuse to be the punchline." Her eyes flashed with something, anger, maybe, or fear. But before she could respond, I turned and started walking away, leaving her standing there in the cold. I didn't look back. Couldn't. If I saw her face one more time, I might lose whatever little control I had left. "Brad, wait!" she called after me, her voice sharper now, more demanding. "You're not being rational. We can work through this." I kept walking. I felt Kyle close behind me, his footsteps echoing mine. I could hear Emily's voice getting louder, more frantic, but I was done listening. Done with her lies, her manipulation, her complete lack of respect for me, for our marriage, for everything we'd built together. As I reached the street, I finally stopped and turned to Kyle. "I need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely steady. "I can't stay in that house. Not with her." Kyle nodded. "You're coming with me." "No way I'm leaving you alone after this." We started walking toward his car, and for the first time in what felt like hours, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of Emily's betrayal still sat heavy in my chest, but at least I was moving forward, away from the wreckage. Just as we reached the car, I heard Emily's voice again, but this time it was different, cold, calculating. She wasn't pleading anymore. She was angry. "Fine, Brad," she yelled from the porch, her voice echoing down the street. "If you want to leave, leave. But don't come crawling back when you realize you're the one who threw everything away." I stopped, my hand on the car door, and turned to face her one last time. She stood there, arms crossed, her expression hard as stone. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered what she'd done, what she'd planned. How she tried to twist everything to make me the bad guy in her warped little fantasy. "I won't be coming back, Emily," I said, my voice calm, steady. "You made sure of that." Without another word, I got in the car, and Kyle drove us away from the house, from the party, from the disaster that had once been my life. As the distance grew between us, I felt a strange sense of clarity, like a fog had lifted from my mind. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being Emily's pawn. This was my life, and I was taking it back. The drive to Kyle's place was silent, but not the kind of peaceful silence you can settle into. It was thick and heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. My mind was racing, but at the same time it felt blank. Numb. I sat there, staring out the window as the streetlights blurred past, trying to process what had just happened, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my wife had orchestrated the ultimate betrayal right under my nose, and then had the audacity to make it my problem for not being open-minded enough to accept it. Kyle hadn't said a word since we left, but I could feel his eyes flicking over to me every now and then, checking to make sure I wasn't about to fall apart. The truth was, I didn't know what I was feeling. It was like I was floating above my own body, watching the whole night unfold from some distant place, trying to make sense of the wreckage. But there was no sense to be made. No logic. Just chaos. Finally, Kyle broke the silence. "You want to talk about it?" he asked quietly, his hands gripping the steering wheel like he was holding back the urge to punch something. I let out a shaky breath, not sure if I was ready to even speak yet. "I don't know what there is to talk about, man," I said, my voice hoarse. "She's been cheating on me for 6 months, and tonight, she just decided to throw it in my face. Like it's no big deal. Like she's doing me a favor by being honest." The word tasted bitter in my mouth. There had been nothing honest about what Emily had done. Kyle nodded, his jaw clenched. "That wasn't honesty, Brad. That was her trying to justify being a complete." He stopped himself, glancing at me. "Sorry, but you know what I mean. She's trying to spin this like she's the reasonable one, and you're just too old-fashioned or whatever the hell she's calling it. It's bulls asterisk asterisk asterisk. She crossed a line, and now she's trying to gaslight you into thinking you're the one being irrational." I sighed, leaning back against the headrest. "Yeah, I know, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. Does it?" Kyle didn't have an answer for that, and honestly, I didn't expect him to. There was no easy way to handle this. No quick fix or comforting words that could make the pain go away. I felt like I'd been hit by a tidal wave, and I was still struggling to keep my head above water. We pulled into Kyle's driveway, the engine cutting off with a low rumble. I hadn't been to his place in a while. It was small but cozy. Some bachelor pad vibe with a couch that had seen better days, and a TV mounted on the wall that looked like it was just barely clinging on. As soon as we walked inside, Kyle motioned for me to sit down on the couch while he grabbed 2 beers from the fridge. He handed one to me, and I cracked it open, taking a long swig without even tasting it. For a few minutes, we sat there in silence, the TV muted in the background, its flickering light the only movement in the room. My mind kept replaying the last few hours over and over, like some cruel loop I couldn't break free from. The party, Mark's smug face, Emily's cold indifference, the disbelief on the faces of my friends and family as they watched it all unfold. "Do you think?" I started, hesitating. "Do you think she ever really loved me? Or was it all just some act?" Kyle took a sip of his beer, considering the question carefully. "I think she did. I mean, I wasn't always around, but you guys seemed happy for a long time. But somewhere along the way something changed. Maybe it was her, maybe it was both of you, I don't know. But whatever she's doing now, that's not love. At least not the kind you deserve. I nodded, staring down at the bottle in my hand. She kept talking about evolving, like she's on some higher plane of existence and I'm just stuck in the past. But if this is what evolution looks like, cheating, lying, disrespecting someone you're supposed to care about, then F*** that. I'll stay stuck. Kyle chuckled darkly. Yeah man, if that's her idea of evolving, she can evolve her ass right out of your life. We both fell silent again, the gravity of the situation sinking in. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was sad. Deeply, profoundly sad. Not just for the marriage I thought I had, but for the person Emily had become. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with. That person was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. Someone who thought it was okay to throw a party for the sole purpose of shattering my world in front of everyone we knew. After a while, Kyle cleared his throat. So what's your plan? I mean, are you going to talk to her again? Go back and, I don't know, try to work things out. The thought of going back, of even being in the same room as Emily again, made me feel sick to my stomach. No, I said firmly. There's nothing to work out. She made her choice and I'm making mine. I'm not going to play her game. I'm not going to be her second option, or whatever the hell she thinks I am. I'll call a lawyer first thing Monday and start the process. I'll pack my things tomorrow. I don't care what happens to that house. I just need to get out. Kyle nodded, his expression serious. Good. That's the right move. You can stay here as long as you need, man. I mean it. Thanks, Kyle. I said, meaning it. He'd always had my back. But this was above and beyond. I'll need it. I don't know where else to go. You don't need to go anywhere, he said firmly. We'll figure it out. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief settle over me. It was like the decision had cleared a path in my mind, something solid to hold onto amid the chaos. I didn't know what the future looked like, but I knew one thing for certain. It didn't include Emily. As the night dragged on, we stayed up talking. Kyle did his best to keep my mind off things, throwing in some dumb stories from work, talking about sports, anything to keep the conversation light. But every so often, my thoughts would drift back to her, to the surreal horror of what she had done. At one point, as the clock ticked past 2 a.m., Kyle leaned back in his chair and said, You know, you should probably block her number, or at least mute her for a while. She's gonna try to get in your head, you know that, right? He was right. Of course he was right. Emily wasn't done with me. She'd think I'd cool down, that I'd see things her way, that I'd evolve. She'd try to sweet-talk me, spin some web of manipulation until I didn't know which way was up. She was good at that, making me doubt myself, making me think I was the one being unreasonable. But not this time. I pulled out my phone and stared at her contact for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the block button. For 7 years, this woman had been my partner, my confidant, my love. But now, she was just a stranger with a knife behind her back. With one final breath, I pressed block. And just like that, Emily was gone from my life. Or at least, she would be. I woke up on Kyle's couch the next morning with a stiff neck and a pounding headache. My back screamed at me for sleeping in a weird position, but I couldn't complain. It was better than waking up next to Emily in that house, pretending like everything was normal. Pretending like my life hadn't just been reduced to rubble. The events of the previous night hit me the moment I opened my eyes. I had half hoped it was a nightmare. One of those vivid, twisted dreams that mess with your head until you snap out of it, sweating but relieved. But no, this was real. My wife had thrown a party to celebrate my cuckolding, to introduce me to the man who had been sneaking into my life for the past 6 months. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the dull ache of betrayal sink deeper into my bones. Every time I replayed the scene from the night before, it felt like some grotesque movie playing on loop in my head. The way Emily had smiled, the smug look on that guy Mark's face, the humiliating stillness in the room as everyone watched my life collapse. And then Emily's cold, dismissive words. The way she acted like I should have just nodded along, clapped politely, and welcomed this guy into my life like he was an old friend and not the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. I sat up, rubbing my face with both hands, trying to shake the weight of it all. Kyle's place was quiet, the early morning sun creeping through the blinds, casting long shadows on the floor. He'd already left for work, but not before leaving a note on the coffee table. Take your time. Stay as long as you need. We'll deal with this one step at a time. I'm here for you. I folded the note in half and tucked it in my pocket. I needed that reminder, someone who was actually on my side. After everything that had happened, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I couldn't stay frozen in this limbo. I had to face the reality of the situation. I had to go back to the house. The thought made my stomach churn, but there was no avoiding it. My things were still there. My life was still there, or at least what was left of it. I needed to start packing up, start separating myself from that place, from her. The idea of walking into that house, of seeing the aftermath of the party, filled me with dread, but I couldn't avoid it forever. By noon, I was standing in front of the front door. It felt strange unlocking it, like I was an intruder in my own home. The air inside felt heavy, stagnant, like the echoes of last night were still lingering, hiding in every corner. I half expected to see Mark sitting on the couch, his feet up like he belonged there, or for Emily to walk in with that indifferent look on her face, as if the betrayal was just business as usual. The living room was a mess. Empty beer bottles, half-eaten plates of food, crumpled napkins, the remnants of the party scattered everywhere. The decorations were still up, mocking me with their bright, festive colors. Balloons with Happy 35th, Brad, floated lazily near the ceiling, deflated, just like I felt. The irony of it all hit me like a slap in the face. She'd planned this whole thing, right down to the smallest detail, all while knowing she was going to introduce me to her lover. All while knowing she was about to shatter our marriage. I walked through the house in a daze, my feet moving on autopilot. Every corner of the place felt tainted now. The kitchen, where Emily and I used to cook together, laughing and drinking wine. The living room, where we'd curl up on the couch and binge-watch shows, her head resting on my shoulder. Our bedroom. God, I couldn't even go in there yet. Felt wrong, dirty, knowing she'd been with him. Knowing she'd probably brought him into this house when I wasn't around. Maybe even into that bed. I stopped in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to breathe through the nausea that was rising in my throat. I thought I was prepared for this, but being here, surrounded by everything we'd built together, made it so much worse. It was like the walls themselves were closing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of everything I didn't know. I had to get out. I needed to get out of this house, but first I had to grab a few things. My clothes, my essentials, anything to make it through the next few days. I could sort out the rest later with a lawyer. But right now I just needed to leave. I made my way to the bedroom, forcing myself to push open the door. It was quiet, untouched since the night before, but it felt wrong. It didn't feel like my room anymore. The bed looked too neatly made, too perfect, like it was hiding secrets in its crisp white sheets. I avoided looking at it for too long, heading straight for the closet. I was pulling out a suitcase from the top shelf when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stairs. My heart froze for a second, and I stopped, listening. I knew that sound too well. It was Emily. She walked into the room like nothing had happened, like it was just another Sunday afternoon and not the morning after the worst night of my life. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she looked almost relieved. "Oh good, you're here," she said casually, as if she was about to ask me how my day was going. "We need to talk." I couldn't believe her nerve. I couldn't believe she had the audacity to act like we were about to have a normal conversation. After everything. After Mark. After the party. After she had humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. I dropped the suitcase onto the bed, my hands clenched into fists. "I don't have anything to say to you, Emily," I said coldly, not even looking at her. "I'm just here to grab my stuff. Then I'm gone." She sighed, walking further into the room. Her arms crossed over her chest like she was about to give me some lecture I didn't ask for. "Brad, come on. You can't just leave like this. I know last night was hard, but we need to talk about it. We need to figure out how we're going to move forward." I turned to her, finally looking at her. Really looking at her. And for the first time, I didn't feel anything. Not love. Not anger. Just emptiness. "There's nothing to move forward to, Emily. You destroyed everything. You did that. Not me." She rolled her eyes, like I was being difficult, like I was the one causing problems here. "You're not even giving this a chance. You're just running away because you're scared of change. We can still make this work, Brad. You just need to open your mind." My jaw tightened, and I felt the last bit of restraint I had slipping away. "Open my mind? You're seriously saying that to me right now? After you threw a party, my birthday party, to introduce me to your affair, you think I should open my mind? What the hell is wrong with you?" Her face hardened. She wasn't used to me talking back like this. Usually, I'd just let her push and push until I gave in. But not today. Not anymore. I didn't do this to hurt you, Brad, she said, her voice firm but calm. I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to show you that relationships can evolve, that we don't have to follow the same old script. You're the one clinging to some outdated idea of what marriage should be. This doesn't have to be the end. We can still have something. You and me and Mark. We can find a new way to be together. That's when I snapped. No, Emily, I said, my voice shaking with anger. We can't have anything anymore. You already made that choice. You made it the moment you brought him into this, the moment you decided that I wasn't enough. I'm not going to stand here and let you make me feel like I'm the crazy one. You don't get to rewrite the rules and expect me to follow along. This marriage, it's over. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something. Panic, maybe, or realization, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same cold indifference. You're really going to throw away 7 years over this? She asked, her voice low, but the venom was clear. You're making a huge mistake, Brad. You're going to regret this. You'll see. I shook my head, feeling the finality of the moment. No, Emily. The only mistake I made was trusting you. With that, I grabbed my suitcase and pushed past her, walking out of the room, out of the house, out of the life we had built together. And this time I wasn't looking back. This time I was free. The door slammed shut behind me with a loud thud, echoing through the hallway like a final punctuation mark to the sentence that was my marriage. I stood there on the front porch for a moment, suitcase in hand, just staring at the street. My heart was still pounding in my chest, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I'd finally done it. I'd walked out, but the relief I thought I'd feel, the sense of liberation I'd imagined in my head, wasn't there. Instead, all I felt was an overwhelming, hollow emptiness. The street was quiet, the world around me moving on like nothing had happened. A couple jogged past, chatting about something mundane. A delivery truck parked a few houses down, and the driver unloaded a package. It was surreal seeing life continue so casually, so normally. How could everything out here look so the same when everything inside me had been ripped apart? I couldn't go back to Kyle's right now. I needed to breathe, to think. Without a plan, without even knowing where I was going, I got into my car, tossed the suitcase in the back seat, and started driving. The radio was off, and the silence inside the car was oppressive, but I didn't dare turn on music. I didn't want to hear any songs that might remind me of Emily, of US, of the life I thought we had. Instead, I let the quiet blanket me, focusing only on the road, each turn feeling automatic, like my body was on autopilot. It was only after driving aimlessly for over an hour that I realized where I'd ended up. The park. Our park. I pulled into the small parking lot, the one we used to come to on Sunday mornings. We'd grab coffee from the little cafe down the road, then take long walks here, talking about everything and nothing. Back then, it felt like we were on the same page, like our lives were synced up. I'd look over at her, laughing, her eyes bright and full of life, and I'd feel this deep, undeniable sense of contentment, of belonging. But now, standing here, staring out at the trees swaying gently in the breeze, I couldn't reconcile that version of Emily with the woman who had stood in front of me just an hour ago, telling me to open my mind, while casually destroying everything we'd built together. I sat down on a bench overlooking the small pond, watching the ducks float lazily across the surface. I tried to collect my thoughts, tried to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. When did I lose her? Was it gradual, like a slow leak in a boat that eventually sinks it? Had I missed the signs? Signs that something fundamental had shifted inside her? Or had she always been like this, hiding behind the facade of a loving wife, waiting for the right moment to show me who she really was? But even as I sat there, racking my brain, trying to find some hidden clue in our past, I realized it didn't matter. Whether she had changed or had been pretending all along, the outcome was the same. Emily had made her choice. She'd chosen Mark, chosen some fantasy life where she could have everything, where she could tear me down and still expect me to stick around as if nothing had happened. I wasn't going to be a part of that. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking me out of my thoughts. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. Emily. I hadn't blocked her on my phone yet, and part of me hated myself for that. But maybe I needed to hear what she had to say, needed to let her throw one last attempt at manipulation my way so I could close the door on it forever. I took a deep breath and swiped to open the message. It was short, cold, exactly what I expected. Emily, if you leave, Don't expect to come back. I hope you realize what you're walking away from. The nerve of her. Even now, she was trying to twist this into some power play, trying to paint me as the one throwing everything away. But she had thrown it away. She'd lit the match and I was just watching the flames burn out. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, debating whether I should respond. Should I tell her off? Should I let her know just how much she'd broken me? Or would that just be giving her what she wanted? More control. More of my energy. I closed the message without responding, putting the phone back in my pocket. I had to keep reminding myself of that one truth. She wasn't the person I'd thought she was, and I wasn't going to give her any more of me. The wind picked up a little, rustling the leaves in the trees. I sat there for what felt like hours, just watching, thinking, feeling the numbness spread through me. I tried to imagine what came next. I had a meeting with a lawyer lined up for Monday, and Kyle had already said I could crash with him for as long as I needed. But beyond that, the future felt like a giant blank slate. No plans, no path, just nothing. And maybe that was okay. Maybe the clean slate was what I needed. A chance to start over. It wasn't like I had a choice. Emily had made sure of that. As the sun started to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, I got up from the bench and headed back to the car. It was time to face the reality of what came next. But as I opened the car door, another thought hit me like a punch to the gut. The house. I couldn't avoid it forever. I would have to go back again, maybe not to live, but to deal with it, to sell it, or split it, or whatever the hell divorce lawyers did when they carved up your life. It wasn't just a house. It was the place we had built together, the place we had made a home, the place that now felt like a tomb, filled with memories that had soured overnight. But I had to go back. For my stuff, for closure, for something. I didn't drive there right away. I wasn't ready to face that yet. Instead, I went back to Kyle's, walking in through the door just as he was getting home from work. He took one look at me, saw the weariness in my eyes, and didn't ask any questions. Just handed me a beer and sat down beside me on the couch, turning on the game without a word. It was what I needed. A distraction, just for a few hours. Something to keep me from spiraling. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I wasn't done with Emily yet. Not completely. There were still pieces to be picked up, pieces of my life that I had to figure out how to separate from hers. The house, the finances, the things we owned together. All the messy, ugly details that come with untangling a life from someone who had betrayed you. But for now, sitting there on that beat-up couch, sipping a cold beer with my brother, I let myself have this moment of peace. Because soon enough, I'd have to go back. Back to the house. Back to the wreckage. And back to the inevitable final confrontation with the woman who had once been my wife. But tonight I let myself just breathe. The storm would come again, but I'd be ready for it. The next morning came too soon, but there was no more delaying it. I knew I had to go back to the house. The thought of walking through that door again, knowing what had happened, what Emily had done, made my skin crawl, but I couldn't keep running from it. There were things I needed to grab, clothes, important documents, whatever dignity I had left. And I needed to face it one last time, to stand in the rubble of what used to be my life and accept that it was over. Kyle offered to come with me, but I told him no. This was something I had to do alone. He didn't push it, just gave me a nod, like he understood what that meant. I appreciated that. Kyle had been my anchor through all of this. But there were some things a man has to face on his own. And walking back into that house, that was one of them. So I drove. The closer I got to the house, the heavier the air felt in my lungs. By the time I turned onto our street, it felt like I had cinder blocks tied to my chest, pulling me down, making it hard to breathe. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles turning white. This had been our neighborhood, our home, and now it just felt like enemy territory. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, but I didn't get out right away. I just sat there, staring at the house. The blinds were drawn, and everything looked eerily still. Like the house itself knew what had happened and was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the first move. I finally forced myself to get out of the car, grabbing the duffel bag from the passenger seat. As I walked up to the front door, memories of that horrible night flooded back. The party, the cake, the way Emily had smiled at me before everything shattered. I shook the thought away. There was no point in rehashing it. What's done is done. The key turned easily in the lock, and the door creaked open, revealing the quiet darkness of the house. I stepped inside, half expecting Emily to be standing there, waiting for me with some new manipulation. But the house was empty, silent, cold. I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath, and stepped further inside, closing the door behind me. The living room was still a mess from the party. Empty cups and plates were scattered everywhere, and the decorations were still hanging, deflated and pathetic. The happy birthday banner sagged in the middle, like even it had given up. I ignored it and headed straight for the bedroom. I didn't want to linger. I didn't want to let the weight of it all press down on me again. I just needed to grab what I came for and leave. But the second I stepped into the bedroom, I froze. There she was, Emily, sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked up when I walked in, her face a mix of exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite place. She wasn't surprised to see me. She'd been waiting, and I couldn't tell if that was worse or better. Part of me had hoped she'd be gone, that I could avoid this final confrontation. But another part of me knew it was inevitable. Of course she'd be here. "Brad," she said quietly, standing up. Her voice was soft, like she was trying to sound gentle, but I wasn't falling for that anymore. I knew her games. I didn't respond at first, just walked past her toward the closet. I could feel her eyes on me, watching, waiting, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of starting this on her terms. I opened the closet door, grabbed a few shirts and tossed them into my bag. It was stupid, but I felt like if I could just keep moving, keep packing, I wouldn't have to face her. I could pretend like she wasn't even there. But Emily wasn't going to let that happen. "Brad," she said again, a little louder this time. "We need to talk." I stopped, my hand still gripping a shirt, and closed my eyes for a second, trying to keep my anger in check. I wasn't in the mood for her excuses, her justifications, her warped version of reality. But I knew this moment was coming, and as much as I hated it, I had to face it. "We've already talked, Emily," I said, still not turning to face her. "There's nothing left to say. I'm here to get my stuff and then I'm gone. That's it." She sighed, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. "You're being so damn stubborn. You won't even give me a chance to explain. You're just running away." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly, turning around to face her. "You already explained everything when you introduced Mark at my birthday party. What more is there to say? Emily, you cheated. You lied. And then you had the nerve to throw it in my face in front of everyone we know. So no, I don't need an explanation. I need to get out of here." Her face hardened, and I could see her jaw tighten. She didn't like that I wasn't playing along with her narrative. She wasn't used to me standing up for myself, and it clearly pissed her off. But I didn't care. Not anymore. "I didn't throw it in your face," she snapped, her calm facade cracking. "I was being honest, Brad. I told you the truth. You always said you wanted honesty, and that's what I gave you. I didn't want to keep sneaking around. I wanted to be open about what's been going on." I shook my head, disgusted. "You think that's honesty? You think throwing a party to reveal your affair is honesty? No, Emily, that's cruelty. You didn't want to be honest, you wanted to make a spectacle of it. You wanted to show off how evolved and enlightened you are, while treating me like I was some fool who should be grateful you even bothered to share." My voice was rising now, the anger spilling out, years of frustration and betrayal coming to the surface. "But you weren't honest with me. You manipulated me. You lied to me for months, and then you tried to rewrite the rules to suit yourself. You didn't care about my feelings. You only cared about getting what you wanted." Emily crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You're acting like I did this to hurt you. That wasn't my intention, Brad. I've changed. I needed more, and I thought, more." I cut her off, my hands shaking. "You didn't need more, Emily. You wanted more. And instead of being an adult about it, instead of talking to me like a partner, you snuck around and then made me out to be the problem when I didn't just roll over and accept it. You treated me like I was an obstacle to your happiness." She flinched at that, but the coldness in her eyes remained. "Maybe I wouldn't have had to sneak around if you weren't so stuck in your ways. You're so rigid, Brad. You're so predictable. You never wanted to take risks, you never wanted to step outside the lines, and I needed something more than that." I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitterness. "So this is my fault now? You're blaming me for your affair? For you lying to me? Jesus, Emily, you really don't see it, do you? You really don't understand what you've done." She didn't say anything, just stood there, her arms crossed defensively. And in that moment, I realized that there was nothing left to say, nothing that could fix this. Emily had made her choice long before I even knew what was happening, and no amount of explaining or justifying could change that. I turned back to the closet, shoving the last of my things into the duffel bag. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of continuing this argument. I was done. Truly, completely done. As I zipped up the bag and slung it over my shoulder, Emily took a step toward me. "Brad, wait." I didn't turn around. "What? You're really just leaving?" I let out a breath and turned to face her one last time. "Yes, Emily. I'm leaving. You made it clear I don't have a place in your life anymore." Her expression flickered, like she wanted to say something, like there was some last-ditch attempt to salvage this. But whatever it was, she swallowed it, and the moment passed. "Fine," she said quietly. "Go." I didn't need to be told twice. Without another word, I walked out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and out the front door. The air outside was sharp and cold, but it felt like the first breath of freedom I'd had in days. As I walked to my car, the weight of everything began to lift, slowly but surely. I wasn't free yet. There were still legal battles to be fought, still the mess of a divorce to navigate, but emotionally, I had finally cut the cord. I had walked away, and this time I wasn't looking back. I threw the duffel bag into the passenger seat and slid into the driver's seat. As I started the engine, I took one last glance at the house, that place I used to think was home. But now, the engine rumbled to life, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the house that used to mean everything to me. But now it was just a shell, a tomb for the life I thought I had, filled with the ghosts of a love that had crumbled the moment Emily decided I wasn't enough. It wasn't a home anymore, it was just a place where betrayal lived. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, never taking my eyes off that front door, the same door I had walked through so many times, never imagining it would be for the last time. Part of me wanted to feel something, sadness, regret, anything, but all I felt was a cold emptiness. I had spent months, maybe years, trying to hold on to something that had slipped away without me even realizing it. As I pulled onto the street, the house disappeared behind me, fading from view like the final frame of a movie. It was over, done. And for the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. There was no more hoping for answers, no more trying to fix what had been shattered beyond repair. Emily's choices had written the ending to our story, and now all I could do was close the book and move on. But moving on, that part wasn't as easy as walking out the door. Where did I even go from here? My life had revolved around her for so long. Every decision, every plan, every moment tied up in the life we'd built together. And now that was gone, ripped away in the most brutal way possible. I was free, sure, but freedom felt like a void. I drove aimlessly for a while, my thoughts swirling in the quiet of the car. What now? What was the next step when everything you'd counted on, everything you'd believed in, had been taken from you? I had Kyle, sure, and I could crash at his place for a while, but beyond that, I didn't have a plan. The future stretched out before me like a dark, empty road, and I had no idea where it was leading. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the cafe near the park. Our park, the one Emily and I used to go to every Sunday. I hadn't planned to come here. My hands had just turned the wheel on their own, like my body was moving on instinct, drawn to the place that held so many memories of us, of better times. I parked the car and walked inside, ordering a coffee just for something to do. The barista gave me a friendly smile, but I barely registered it. I was in a fog, disconnected from everything around me. I took my cup and went to sit by the window, looking out at the park. Couples were walking hand in hand. Kids were playing on the swings. Families were having picnics. Life was moving on, indifferent to the storm that had ripped through mine. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring out at the world that kept spinning while I felt like I was stuck in place. My mind kept drifting back to Emily, to the way she'd looked at me with that cold indifference, the way she'd twisted everything, tried to make me believe that I was the one at fault for not being open-minded enough to accept her betrayal. But the truth was simple. I wasn't the problem. She had betrayed me, and no amount of rationalization or manipulation could change that. For the first time in a long time, I knew that none of this was my fault, and that knowledge gave me a strange sense of peace, even if it was a bitter kind. The cafe started to fill up with people as the day wore on, and I knew I couldn't sit there forever, drowning in my thoughts. I needed to do something, anything to break free from the spiral I was in. I stood up, grabbed my coffee, and walked out, heading across the street toward the park. I wandered down the familiar path Emily and I used to walk together, but this time, it felt different. I wasn't here to relive memories. I was here to create distance from them, to claim this space as my own again. As I walked, I thought about the future, about what came next. I had a meeting with the divorce lawyer on Monday, and there would be a lot to sort through: money, the house, who got what. The thought of that mess made my head hurt, but it was a necessary step. I needed to untangle my life from Emily's completely. And after that, I had no idea. I sat down on one of the benches near the pond, sipping my coffee, watching the ducks swim lazily across the water. The stillness of the park was comforting in a way. It reminded me that life would go on, even if I had no idea what mine was going to look like now. I wasn't tied to Emily anymore. I wasn't tied to that house, that life we'd built. I was untethered, scared, sure, but also free. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the pond, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. For a moment, I froze, my heart jumping into my throat. But when I pulled it out, I saw that it wasn't Emily. It was Kyle. Kyle, you good? Need me to pick you up or something? I smiled to myself, grateful for the one constant in my life right now. Me, I'm good. Just needed some air. I'll head back soon. I put the phone away, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time since everything had gone down, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I wasn't okay, not yet, but I could see a way forward, even if it was just the faintest outline of a path. And that was enough for now. I stood up, taking one last look at the park, and started walking back to my car. I didn't know what the future held for me, but I knew one thing. I was done letting Emily control my life. I was done letting her dictate how I felt, what I believed, who I was. The sun was setting as I drove back to Kyle's. The sky streaked with brilliant colors. Deep reds and oranges, fading into purples and blues. Felt like the end of something, but also the beginning of something new. Something unknown, yes. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. As I turned onto the highway, leaving the park and the memories behind, I let myself imagine a future without her. A future that was mine, fully mine, unburdened by betrayal and lies. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a glimmer of hope.